Добрый день. Давайте проверять связь. Oh, and by the way, today's stream is in English. So, good afternoon, everyone. I'm glad to see you all, and I hope you had great New Year's break. I did. I know I did. Anyway, we are going to get started because I have so many things to tell you today, and the topic is quite complicated. So let's get into it, and all questions later. I'll start with the story. As usual, let's get back to the very beginning when I told you stories at the beginning. The story is called How Sherlock Holmes Taught Me to Use Guided Discovery in My Lessons. When I was 9 or 10 years old, I found a thick book of stories about Sherlock Holmes at my grandpa's house. I read it and reread it multiple times. And since then, I was dreaming about becoming a real detective. Well, as you can see, it didn't work out the way I really wanted, but I learned some detective skills after all. So, when I learned English at school, I started noticing certain patterns in words and structures, and we didn't have really good lessons at school, so most of the things that I learned I had to figure out on myself. For example, I worked out some of the reading rules, how to read open and closed syllables. This was my little discovery. Nobody told me about it, but I realized that there's some kind of rule behind it. I learned that PH gives the sound F. I learned different patterns for irregular verbs, and that you can group them into these pattern groups and it will be easier to remember them. I learned or figured out the rules of adding S and ing endings to different verbs and so on. So we were never taught these things at school. So it was very exciting when I started studying at university and all my theories confirmed. And I learned a lot more because at university we had much better quality of lessons. A few years ago, I watched a video by a polyglot, Steve Kaufman. He's a 75-year-old Canadian grandpa who speaks and understands 20 languages, most of which he self-studied. And this was a video on why some language learners are successful and others fail. So in his video, he told about a theory, what a successful learner has that other people don't. And there are three things. First, it's a desire, a real wish, internal wish to learn a language, not like an enthusiasm during the New Year resolutions things, no, but a real reason and desire. Time. And the third one was skill of noticing. Usually, well, there's a lot more to that theory, but what we're interested in is the skill of noticing. Basically, the technique of guided discovery that we're discussing today, among other things, teaches students exactly that. The ability to pay attention and notice certain patterns of language, which will help you remember the rules better, see some structure behind them where's possible, and remember them much better. So, In a nutshell, guided discovery is a technique that teachers can use to help their students see the rules through different examples, figure out the grammar rule, and remember it better. Obviously, if you use it regularly and if you use it correctly, it will work. But believe me, the first few times it will fail. Just don't stop after that. The important things, the question we were asked was, what exactly should we do with the text to use guided discovery? So guided discovery technique has 5 stages to it. It's very easy to remember. Step 1 is called exposure to the target language. Target language is what you want to teach. So basically, you need to find a really good example of the target language in a text. It can be a written text, it can be an audio, a video, it doesn't matter. The important thing is this should be manageable text, meaning level should be right. It should be interesting and catchy. Example. You want to teach your elementary level students present simple for he, she, it. They already know present simple for I and they. Now you teach them he, she, it, and then there's this ending thing going on. Only positive sentences. I chose this example because it's quite easy and it can be used for any age group, because we teach all our students present simple, basically, no matter how little or adult they are. So you choose a text, let's say, about the typical life of British people. Adult students may be interested in it. I based this example on adult learners. So there are 4 paragraphs in the text. It's not a very long text. 3 paragraphs are written with they. So basically, like British people, they do this, they do that, and so on. Your students are already familiar with present simple for they. And the last paragraph is given in he, she. That's what we will need to teach later. So students read the text. Usually at this point we read it only for gist, discuss the context, discuss some things. They need to be familiar with what is going on. So typical things, this is a perfect way to teach present simple. Step 2. After you worked with the text, like usual reading text or listening or whatever, you need to highlight the target language. So you need to draw attention to the target language and help your students using guiding questions. Start with the forms they know. For example, you can ask them, like, look at the first paragraph, underline all the verb forms, and they go and underline the verbs. Then you can ask, what stands before the verb? And before the verb, in every case, there will be they. Okay, do we add anything to the verb? No, we don't. Then draw their attention to the 4th paragraph and ask the same thing. So they need to notice that all the verbs have something at the end, and that before this verb we have he or she. Elicit the difference between s and es verbs, and if there are any irregular verbs, if you want to teach them right away, like for example have, has, you can do it as well. But if we talk about really low levels or children, it's better to be left for another time. So step 3, after you drew attention to the target language, after students noticed the pattern, a certain pattern, you need to formulate the rule. So together with your students, formulate the rules that in present simple, if we have he or she, we need a verb with an ending s, and if there is these certain cases, we will need to use es. And do it like you start saying the rule and they need to finish your sentences, or it can be an exercise typed in where they will complete the gaps and finish these rules together. Use then at this step 3, use CCQs, concept checking questions to check understanding. Once again, after you spelled out the rule for them, ask, so in present simple, positive sentence, if we have they, what do we use after it? And give them some verb so they can use it. If we have he, what do we use after it? Like, for example, there was work, and then works, and then works, and so on. And other questions, again, to help them, to help you understand if they understood what you've just taught them, and to help them repeat this rule again and really think about it. Because if they just don't think about it and do the task automatically, well, the result will be not very nice. Step 4. After you did that, your students have just learned the new rule. Go to controlled practice activities. In this case, 2 activities are more than enough for a 45-50-minute lesson. Sometimes even 1 is enough, depends on your students. The first task here can be a list of verbs that they know that they should write in the form for he or she, or rewrite the sentences, or rewrite the story in he or she. And the second, or it can be like complete the sentences with the correct form of the verb in present simple. Some sentences will be with they, some sentences with he, and so on. So they can practice that. After you've had controlled practice, you come finally to step 5, freer practice. And here you need to use any communicative activity to practice the new rule in a freer manner. What it means is, with this low level, for example, and for this particular example, you can use an activity. You can prepare a list of questions about typical day or typical lives in your student's country, if it's a mixed class with mixed nationalities, or a typical day of the students, and so on. So basically, students can ask each other questions and work in like dynamic pairs, or like any. It's not the point here or how you organize it, but basically they ask each other questions, or they ask only one partner questions, they gather the answers, and then they need to report back to the class what they learned about he or she, their partner. And they tell this story. They don't need to write the full sentences. That's important. That's a speaking task. So they just write some notes next to the questions, and then they build their sentences from scratch when they report back to the class. So in these 5 steps, you actually went through all stages of guided discovery from the very beginning, from exposing students to a very good example which will really help them to see the pattern and understand it. And through like noticing process, and then figuring out the rule, and then control practice, and then freer practice. And again, if you do this regularly, and if you do it right, if you train your students to like perceive grammar like that, your students will thank you later, believe me. Okay, I'm going to see if we have any questions. And while I'm doing that, I will tell you why guided discovery is lit, as they say, as kids say nowadays. Basically, it has a lot of different benefits, and the most important benefit is that if you figure out the rule for yourself, if you notice a pattern, even with the help of somebody else, it's much more memorable than when you are given the rule like that. And this is a very important thing, especially when teaching teenagers and adults, because if you don't train them to do that, what you get is students who don't learn outside the class, and we don't want that. And if you teach them to do that, it won't it won't happen like that. No, you need to spend some time and train them. It will take at least a year for them to get used to it. If you do it regularly, every time you teach grammar. And then maybe another year for them to start noticing these things themselves. Everything is personal, obviously. There may be faster learners and slower learners, but from my personal experience, this is how it works. Your students won't like it first, but you need to prepare them for that and explain them all the benefits. It's okay, especially if you work with adults, they will understand. And also it's much more fun, because if you work with kids, you can tell them that they are going to play detectives. And I had this talk with my kids at some point. I mean, the kids that I teach, the kids that I used to teach, and they really like the idea, because it's always interesting to make it like a quest and not just learn boring rules. So the lesson is much more livelier for that matter. Okay, and I can see one question. If all the grammar rules might be learned through the guided discovery, which of them can't be? All the grammar rules can be learned through guided discovery to this or that extent. The best rules to be learned through guided discovery are the rules which have very clear patterns and very clear structure. For example, tag questions. For example, comparative forms, irregular verbs, different types of irregular verbs, all the spelling rules and things like that. Wherever there is a solid rule, guided discovery is a must. But some rules are really a little bit, let's say, you know English. Some rules are messy. Some rules have more exceptions than the rule itself. And that's why with those, you won't use guided discovery to its full potential. You will just use some pieces. But anyway, don't give away the answers right away. You know all that. I'm not the person to teach you that. Basically, as we all do, communicate with your students and lead them. Lead the way and let them follow. Okay, any other questions? I don't see any. So let's sum up and let's see where you can find all this information that I've just told you. I have an article written long time ago for SkyTeach magazine, for SkyTeach blog, and I think that for our listeners in YouTube and other social medias, except for Instagram, my moderator can give this link about guided discovery with examples, can give this link to you to read and check out other articles on guided discovery in SkyTeach blog, because there are really good ones there. It's one thing. Another thing, as usual, after the our streams, on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays in my blog, I will write a whole recap. It's a lot of information. That's why I've broken it down into 3 posts, and I will post Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday on my blog the recap of what we've just discussed. There will be all the steps, there will be my personal story, and then on Saturday there will be a separate reading and watching list if you want to learn more about guided discovery and if you want to gradually include it into your lessons. And if there are too many questions under the recording of this stream, then maybe, just maybe, we will think of making a big stream or a webinar on the topic, just to clear out everything and give you more examples to work with. So this would be it. I hope you enjoyed this session. I was glad to see you all. I wish you all a great evening, and I see you all in a week. Bye-bye.